Return of the Reich. The greater the lie, the greater the chance that it will be believed. Cheers and jubilation erupting from the war-weary people of Europe echoed around the world. The Second World War was over. While liberated countries now free of the Nazis' brutal regime celebrated in the streets, Germany lay in ruins. With everybody believing the news that the tyrannical dictator and his young wife committed suicide, Adolf Hitler made his elaborate escape. Apart from the creaking and groaning of twisting metal, the port was silent. As cordite and diesel lingered in the air, he took a deep breath, looked at the glistening black oil rippling on the ocean's surface, and glared at the smoldering wrecks of his decimated fleet. Although enraged by his defeat, Hitler knew this would not be the end of his plans for a new world order, and a new Reich would rise from the ashes. But not in this lifetime. Piercing his lips, he glowered as he boarded the prototype U-boat. If you want to shine like the sun, first you have to burn like it. Are you okay, Church? You look terrible. We heard the commotion from outside. What happened? Asked Ryan as he stood in front of the trembling portal keeper. Churchill Potts gazed around the room in a daze as he wiped vomit from around his mouth. Here, boss, drink this, said a young blonde woman, putting a cool glass of water to his lips. Church's hand shook as he took the glass, smiled at the worried-looking guide, and gulped down the refreshing water. Thanks, Pinky, he said, and as his faculties returned, he looked around the spirit room, which looked like a tornado had blown through their small stone cottage in Yorkshire. Pinky handed him a wet flannel, and as he wiped his face, he looked at the two mortal spirit guides, his team, and family. Pinky gasped and pointed. Whatever it was, it scorched the wall behind the portal. Church took another sip of water and nodded. I can't smell Brussels sprouts. Where was Granny Pearl? Why did she not come to help? Church, still shaken, quivered and shook his head. I don't know, Ryan, and that's what concerned me. If this powerful demon so easily overpowered me, perhaps it did the same to our spirit keeper and guide before it came through our portal. Pinky picked Church's iPhone off the floor, handed it to him, and asked, what would be powerful enough to do that? She then chuckled and said, and why pick on our Yorkshire Bob Hoskins look-alike? You should have set T-Ferret on it, said Pinky, mimicking Church's Yorkshire brogue. Church smiled, focused on the small keyboard, typed in instructions, and an image came on screen. He would, said Church, showing them the image on the phone's screen. Pinky and Ryan gasped as they glared at the image. Ryan furrowed his brow. But he's been dead over 70 years, shouldn't he be tucked away in the afterlife? Church shrugged. I don't understand either, Ryan. We need Granny Pearl here, perhaps she can explain. While Church recovered his spirit notes and read details of the instructions given to him by the demon, Ryan and Pinky righted the overturned furnishings in the spirit room. Church, the mortal keeper of the Potts portal, felt concerned for his spirit keeper and her spirit guide, his deceased grandparents, Pearl and Jack Potts, who taught him about the spirit world and his duty as the portal keeper. He had read the ancient Potts journal many times and, although it mentioned a diabolous spirit entering the Potts portal over 400 years ago, he hadn't paid it much heed. Although brief, the confrontation confused Church as the dark spirit gave off no aroma and it had a black aura. With its power so intense, Church felt the air sucked out of the room, making his head spin before he vomited. Now feeling concerned, Church looked at the youngest member of the Path team, Pinky, washing the scorch marks off the wall. Church thought how much this young woman resembled her dead aunt, Heidi, but although she had a porcelain complexion, piercing blue eyes, and an angelic face, she cursed and swore like a Grimsby fishwife with a Danish twang when riled, especially at Ryan. Before Heidi's spirit asked Church to rescue her, Sharon Pinquist's parents had kept her locked away like an insane child, mistaking the frightened teenager's psychic gift as madness. They would have had her institutionalized if not for the benefits they received as her registered carers. Church then looked at the ever-hungry Ryan, the last member to join the team. Previously a professional boxer, Ryan had attained his gift by accident. Church, along with Pinky, were asked by their spirit keeper to meet Ryan, explain his gift, and reassure him. His crooked nose, muscular build, and Cockney accent came in useful while the paranormal assisted treasure hunters conducted their edict. They found treasures hidden by restless spirits during their lifetime and gave them to their disbelieving and sometimes suspicious families, so the spirit would cross over to the afterlife. Although a powerful keeper, Church, feeling anxious, rubbed his chin and furrowed his brow. Why would this Diabolus want us to find it and take something to his son? I wasn't aware he had any children, he shuddered when recalling the power he had felt. He then smiled and looked relieved as he spun around to face the portal, now filled with a rainbow of intense lights as the smell of Brussels sprouts filled the air. "Great," said Ryan, raising his eyebrows. "Granny Pearl's here, so maybe we can get some answers." Mankind grew strong through eternal struggle, it follows that he shall perish through eternal peace. The keepers swirled around the portal, filling it with their dulled rainbow auras. Twig Hansen, and his spirit keeper father, had been conjoined in this limbo for decades after one of the two Diaboluses hovering back and forth in a large glass room within the Hansen's cellar had trapped them. Twig looked over at his wife and young son's crimson spirit guides swirling around their skeletons within their glass coffin at the center of a large glass room resembling a huge aquarium. "Something evil's happening, son," said Fritz. "Whatever Hitler and Jan Hannessen planned all those years ago before Jan Hannessen and his SS thugs trapped us in here and shot Frieda and Ulrich must be coming to fruition." "I agree, father. Why else would Hitler's demon risk going to the spirit world other than to cause mayhem? But we are helpless to do anything," he said, sounding enraged as the Diaboluses hovered around a red wooden chest. "Soon, Eric, we will be out of this prison, and with the help of my son, my Reich will once again dominate the planet," said a menacing voice from the black mist swirling around the chest. "Excellent. So their US president is dead?" cackled Eric's midnight blue Diabolus. "Yes, I saw his spirit on the way to the afterlife before I went to see Potts. Once my son is made president, he will have the power of the world at his fingertips. He will be surprised and overjoyed to meet his real father and release our weapon on a weak, unsuspecting world." Erich Jan Hannessen was not only Hitler's Jewish psychic when they were alive, but a powerful Diabolus in death, sniggered, and with hope in its voice, asked, "And you are certain Potts will come? Will he be alone?" "No, he has two mortal spirit guides who will accompany him, so you will also have a vessel." "Excellent, excellent. Thank you, my father," said Eric's Diabolus that pulsated with excitement. "We can deliver the journal to my son together as proof, and he will launch the weapon that Eichmann developed." The Diabolus swirled over the red wooden chest and with a sneer in its tone, said, "But the incompetent fool never completed it in time for us to release it in 1945 and give us total victory during our lifetime. But no matter," the Diabolus sneered, "with the help of my son, we can eliminate a weak world in a single blow, leaving only my new Reich and a few slaves to refashion the world to my utopia as I ordained." Never deprive someone of hope. It may be all they have. "I still don't understand how the spirit world lost the Hansen's portal all those years ago," said Pinky, sitting in the front seat of the rental car as it bumped its way along a covered track and emerged into a clearing in the Kinzigtal Valley within the Black Forest. Church told her. "It's like Granny Pearl explained, portals appear as many balls of light in the spirit world. So if one closes it is like a light being turned off in the vastness of space. Without the beacon of the spirit's keeper's aura, the closed portal would be impossible to trace within the spirit world." But Granny Pearl said that it appeared again for a moment over 20 years ago, the same time they said they traced a Diabolus briefly entering the spirit world, said Ryan, also looking confused. Church nodded. "I think that's when Hitler actually died and became a Diabolus." I also believe the portal was opened for him and that's where he has been hiding. Opened by whom, and why has he now come out of hiding and contacted you? Church shrugged. We don't know who or what opened the portal, Ryan. He rubbed his chin. I can only assume that the last Diabolus encounter in the spirit world came through our portal 400 years ago. It must have left some kind of residue. We just don't know. Oh, well, it seemed suspicious how he contacted you the same day as the US president suddenly dropped dead. Church looked in the rearview mirror at Ryan smirking on the back seat and tutted. Don't be daft, Ryan, he died of a heart attack in America, so the Diabolus have nothing to do with that. And you are sure it's here? Church nodded. According to what the Diabolus told me, it is Pinky. Yes, look. With his hand on the steering wheel, Church pointed as they drove round a hillock and saw a white stone cottage tucked away in the alpine valley with white wisps of smoke curling from a cobbled stone chimney stack. It's picturesque, said Pinky. It reminds me of our cottage in York, and the crisp alpine air felt like an English autumn day. Ooh, said Ryan with a beaming smile and his head out of the window. I can smell fresh bread baking. Church felt trepidation as they drove up to the thick wooden door. He rubbed the talisman under his shirt that Granny Pearl and Grandpa Jack instructed them all to make and stop the car. Fear coursed through him as he recalled his encounter with the Diabolus, and he looked at Pinky and then back at a smiling Ryan. It doesn't look like the lair of an evil tyrant, but there must be someone here. I wonder if they will make me a sandwich. That fresh bread smells delicious. Can't you think about anything other than bloody food, Ryan, said Pinky, scolding him. Ryan smirked. How can we fight evil demons on an empty stomach? Besides, Granny Pearl and the other spirits said they were watching us and would help once we found the location. Yeah, said Pinky, sounding confident. She said they would pop through temporary portals and kick the demon's ass until we can fix the Hansen's portal. Well, she might not have put it like that, but that's what she meant, she chuckled. Although Church smiled and nodded, he knew this would not be that simple. He turned off the ignition and took a deep breath. Okay team, let's go. Pinky, Church, and Ryan got out of the car and approached the door. They stood back looking aghast when a large German man with a smile a mile wide opened the door. Welcome. We have been expecting you, he said, as a German woman with tightly bunched blonde hair and harsh features came and stood beside him. I am Hans and this is my female operative, Hilda. What did they say? Whispered Pinky, as only Church's keeper's gift gave him the ability to understand every language known. Church smiled and introduced the team. Hans invited them into the warm homely cottage. Ryan tapped his lips together when he saw a fresh crusty loaf on the table with a wedge of fresh cheese and a juicy ham hock on the thick wooden table. Our handler told us that you would arrive soon. We are honored you came during our watch, said Hilda, looking excited and relieved. Would you like something to eat or would you prefer to go straight to the cellar? Smiled Hans. I would love a sandwich. No, we're fine, said Church, interrupting Ryan. Please take us to the cellar. Ryan sighed and broke off a chunk of cheese as Hans and Hilda led them to the cellar door, where Hans took a large key off a hook, turned on the old light switch outside, and opened the wooden door. The couple had been on duty at the cottage for 2 years. They'd always felt confused why they had to stand on the wooden gantry of the cold, damp cellar and read aloud any news article on certain subjects as ordered by their handler. Their orders were to never go down the cellar, but several days ago, their handler in Berlin told them to expect strangers, show them into the cellar, and when they returned, obey their orders. With Ryan chomping on his lump of cheese, the three walked a short distance along a small wooden gantry until they stood at the top of wooden steps. We will await your return as instructed. Just knock and we will open the door. Heil Hitler, said Hans, snapping to attention and giving a Hitler gruss before locking the door behind them. As the path team reached the bottom of the old wooden steps, Church gasped. The team saw Wick and Fritz's auras swirling around the corner of the room. Church furrowed his brow and looked confused at the floor when he saw a smudge. That was their pentagram protection. What the hell happened here? He thought. "Welcome Churchill Potts, and your friends," said a guttural voice from within the glass room that sent a chill down Church's spine as he spun around and saw the swirling black mists hovering in the doorway of the glass room. Church's eyes widened and he gasped. "To Diabolus." That explained who opened the portal before. "I must let Granny Pearl know what they are up against," he thought, and looked at the demonic symbols of concealment and strength on the glass walls. He then saw two spirit guides' crimson auras in the glass coffin in the center of the room. Church trembled, realizing he and his spirit cavalry had underestimated this powerful demon's ability and cunning. "Come in here, Potts," ordered the demon with a throaty roar. "I want you to open this chest and take the contents to my son." Church glanced inside the glass room at the old red wooden chest as Pinky and Ryan looked at one another, able to understand the German-speaking demon. Church furrowed his brow and quivered. He knew that once in the glass room he would be powerless. He took a deep breath and felt his talisman. "What are you waiting for, Potts? Come in here. Now." Church heard the sarcasm in the Diabolus's tone when he said, "Are you waiting for your puny spirits to rescue you? Any attempts to defeat us will be futile. Now, come in here. And bring the man guide," said Eric's Diabolus, having decided to use Ryan as his vessel. Ryan gasped, although he had never been afraid of anyone. Something in the demon's menacing tone sent a shiver down his spine. He rubbed his amulet under his shirt and sounding defiant snarled, "Piss off, Kraut. You want to fight, you can come out here." Church felt concerned and afraid. He knew with the portal closed any help would come from temporary portals, and new spirits used their energy to create temporary portal. "Very well, Potts, if that's how you want it," said Hitler's demon, and its black aura flew out of the glass room and streaked towards Church. "Now," shouted Church, and the three opened their jackets showing their amulets. The Diaboluses stopped, Hitler's in front of Church and Eric's in front of Ryan. Church heard the demon gasp. Its aura dimmed for several seconds before it chuckled and flew into Church's mouth. Church gagged before his body felt on fire. He slumped to the floor, as did Ryan, convulsing as they fought a battle with the demons within. Church felt in limbo, with his essence surrounded by an immense white light with the large black orb of the Diabolus in front of his rainbow orb. Pinky looked on trembling. She felt helpless until she smelt Granny Pearl's Brussels sprouts and Grandpa Jack's Briar cream odors along with several others as the spirits joined the fray. "The demons are in Church and Ryan," she screamed. "We know, Pinky," said Granny Pearl, "don't be afraid, we can help now." The battle raged within Church as the Diabolus threw his soul around his inner being like a ragdoll. "Your vessel is mine, Potts. Accept your fate and leave. It will save you any more pain and your soul can go to your precious afterlife." "Never," said Church, sounding defiant. His rainbow orb soul rushed again at the large black orb, only to be swatted away like an insect by the sniggering demon. Church knew his attempts were futile, as he felt weaker with each assault. Pinky, seeing Church's tremors ease, knew he was losing his internal battle. Bursting into tears of frustration, she looked up. "Help him," she screamed, but there was no reply. Church then felt a rush of energy as spirit keepers and guides joined him. Seeing rainbow and crimson orbs flashing on and off and barging the black demon gave him renewed energy. He launched himself again at the demon and felt it weakening as its black orb faded and then vanished. Church opened his eyes, much to the relief of Pinky, who knelt down beside him and helped him stand. They saw a myriad of bright rainbow and crimson lights appearing and disappearing outside the glass room. The Diabolus hovered around the glass room cursing, and when it saw Church standing, it snarled, "This is only temporary, Keeper. Your power alone cannot defeat me. You will be mine." Church looked down at Ryan shaking and convulsive on the floor, knowing the battle going on within his young friend as crimson and rainbow orbs flew in to help. The demons correct Church. We can't keep them confined for long with temporary portals. You need to open the Hansen's portal, said Granny Pearl sounding anxious. Church looked confused at his grandmother's rainbow orb now stood beside him and asked, "How do I do that, Gran?" Church then looked at Ryan, whose quivering body seemed to have taken on new energy as more orbs flew into him. "Go to the portal, son, and hurry," said Grandpa Jack's crimson orb sounding urgent. While Pinky knelt down beside Ryan urging him to fight, Church and the two orbs went over to the portal. The keeper's auras pulsated inside as they were aware something was about to happen, giving them their freedom. "Church, put your arm in the portal," Granny Pearl instructed. Church gasped and looked at her rainbow orb. His eyebrows raised and sounding shocked said, "But Gran, you told me Immortal Keeper and Spirit Keeper cannot be present in a portal at the same time." He trembled when he saw the intertwined keepers and pointed. That must be what happened to them. "Trust me, son," said Granny Pearl, "this is not our portal, Church, and neither Grandpa Jack nor I am in there. Please, Church, hurry." Church looked, gulped, closed his eyes, and put his arm inside the swirling rainbows. "Ah!" he screamed as his body jolted and electricity coursed through him. He shuddered when he felt as if a fire crawled through him. He then breathed a sigh of relief as the pain stopped and a shimmering human-shaped rainbow appeared by his side. Church felt Wig Hansen's emotion of freedom and gratitude before he entered the now empty portal and vanished. Church looked back toward the glass room and saw the rainbow and crimson orbs disappearing as were the ones now coming from Ryan. His grandparents' orbs also vanished, leaving Church afraid and confused. "What's happening?" he said aloud as the last orb vanished. He rushed over to Ryan and Pinky. Pinky looked up at him with desperation written across her face as Ryan's body now lay still with only the occasional spasm as Eric Diabolus overwhelmed Ryan's soul. "They've left Ryan to die," croaked Pinky as she held onto his hand and felt his life draining. "Yes, Potts, what did you expect? They can't defeat us, we are far too powerful," said the demon and sniggered. "Now where were we? Ah yes. I was about to take my vessel." Church looked down at Ryan and then glared at the Diabolus. "I will give you my body, but make him stop and leave Ryan alone. You are in no position to make deals, Potts. We will take you both and kill the woman guide, she isn't necessary." Pinky gritted her teeth and scowling at the demon. The Diabolus chuckled. "Feisty, maybe I will have fun with her before she dies." "You can try, Buster," snarled Pinky as the Diabolus came from the glass room and hovered over to Church. "Now Potts, do you want to make this easy or hard? If you choose the easy route I will allow the female guide to live." Church gulped, recalling his last battle with his powerful adversary. With a slim hope that Pinky might be spared, he nodded. "Take off the amulet," snarled the Diabolus, "that will make it easier for me and less painful for you. Give me your word that Pinky won't be harmed and I will not put up any fight." "You have my word, Potts, now take off the amulet," said the Diabolus and sniggered. Church sighed, removed the amulet from around his neck, and handed it to Pinky. "No, Church," screamed Pinky looking distraught. "We have no choice, Pinks," said Church, looking into the tear-filled eyes of the girl who he considered his daughter. He then looked at Ryan's still body and knew his battle was almost lost. "I am sorry for getting you into this, my friend," he whispered. Pinky juddered. She had never felt so helpless or afraid as she clung on to Church's amulet and recalled what Granny Pearl had told them. "You can never defeat this Diabolus alone. You need the combined power of the three of you, and these amulets will amplify your powers and protect you." While she heard the demon gloating at Church, she took off her amulet, leant over, and removed Ryan's. With the three amulets together in her hand, she felt a surge of energy and glared at Hitler's Diabolus she now saw. The Diabolus stopped gloating and snarled. "Drop the amulets, woman, or you will be sorry." Not as sorry as you, dickhead, she screamed as she stood up and punched the shimmering black aura halfway down. Pinky's hand felt on fire as the Diabolus yelled and backed away. Pinky, still with her hand in the black mist, moved forward, forcing the Diabolus back toward the glass room. Church felt overjoyed. "Well done, Pinky," he said, watching the pair moving toward the room. Although his excitement was short-lived as Pinky screamed as her hands glowed red and she pulled it from the laughing Diabolus. "I will deal with you later," he snarled at Pinky and went back over to Church. "Now Potts." He stopped mid-sentence, gasped, and flew back to the glass room. Church looked around at the portal and breathed a sigh of relief. Now filled with shimmering rainbow and crimson human-shaped spirits that flew out towards the glass room, the cellar buzzed with energy. Keepers and guides surrounded the room and Pinky. "Pinky, put the amulets on Ryan," instructed Granny Pearl as keepers flew into Ryan's body, and as soon as Pinky placed the amulets on Ryan's chest, his body juddered. "Sorry we took so long, Church, but we have been watching. We needed to rejuvenate to have enough power to contain the Diaboluses," said Granny Pearl. "What's happening?" gasped Pinky as a midnight blue mist oozed from Ryan's mouth and nose and the dim blue light took human shape and was quickly surrounded by the spirit keepers and guides. With Pinky's mouth agape, she saw the circle of keepers and guides moving towards the portal with Eric's Diabolus drifting at its center trying in vain to barge its way out. The lights went into the portal and vanished. "They're taking the weakened Diabolus to the afterlife to find peace," said Granny Pearl. "What's happening?" "I'm bloody starving," said a voice behind them. "Ryan, you dopey tonk!" yelled Pinky, turning around and with a smile a mile wide went over and knelt down beside her dazed-looking colleague and friend, becking him on his cheek. "Ugh, get off! What's happening?" Ryan then noticed the room full of vivid colors reflecting off the spirit keepers and guides surrounding the glass room. "I see you got old Adolf trapped, Granny Pearl, but where's the other bugger? And what are the two in the glass coffin?" "That is my wife and young son," said a German keeper who hovered beside them and sighed. "I need to rescue them, but because of the demonic symbols no spirit guardians can enter the glass room. And they've taken the other evil sod to the afterlife," said Pinky, looking relieved. "What are you thinking, Church?" asked Granny Pearl, picking up his emotion of intrigue. "Gran, if the symbols on the walls are to keep spirits out and the ones on the coffin are to keep spirits in, how about we do a little exchange?" They listened while Church outlined his plan. Church picked up a worried emotion from Granny Pearl's spirit as she told him, "It's risky, Church, you know we can't enter the room to protect you should you fail." Church nodded. "I know, Gran, but as long as we take enough reinforcements with us, we should be okay." "Are you feeling up to it, Ryan?" asked Church, realizing he must be exhausted after his battle. Ryan shrugged. "Apart from being hungry, I feel great. I don't know what happened, but I want to kick that evil Kraut's ass." "Right, team. I will hold the amulets while you hold on to me," said Church as the three tentatively walked through the door of the glass room while being scrutinized by the Diabolus awaiting its opportunity. With Pinky and Ryan holding Church's shoulder, the three shuffled to the glass coffin where Frida and Ulrich's crimson auras now spun wildly. With the Diabolus snarling and spitting fury as he rushed towards them and then backed away, Ryan and Pinky opened the glass lid. "Thank you," said Frida. Church felt the relief from her and Ulrich before their spirits shot out of the room. The three smiled as they saw them reunited with Twig outside as the Diabolus laughed. "So Potts, you have released my hostages. You achieved nothing, they were of no further use to me, but you are." The Diabolus's black aura expanded and surrounded the team. The amulets glowed and combined with their gifted powers formed a glowing bubble of energy around them. Tingles of electricity coursed through them all, and with the intense heat given off by the amulets, Church's hands then felt on fire. Like a misty black sponge, The Diabolus's power slowly shrank their protective bubble, and they all screamed with pain as the Diabolus released jolts of its demonic power. With the concerned spirit keepers and guides yelling outside, the Diabolus overpowered the three and their energy bubble collapsed, sending them sprawling to the floor. Although the struggle had weakened the Diabolus, it knew that once it had its vessel it would be unstoppable. Pinky and Ryan gasped and looked terrified as the Diabolus entered Church, sniggering. Ryan and Pinky, seeing Church's body jerking, looked at each other. "It is in for a shock, but I hope Church knows what he's doing," said Ryan with a quiver in his voice. The pair picked up Church and placed him into the glass coffin. "Surprise," said Granny Pearl's rainbow orb as the Diabolus' large black orb appeared within Church's inner being. The weakened Diabolus felt stunned as he was surrounded by rainbow and crimson orbs. Like a pack of dogs on a fox, they harassed the demon, draining his power further with every assault. Overwhelmed, it fought the keepers and guides, sending some fleeing after draining their power. "I hope there are enough of us. We can't get any more reinforcements into the room without you bringing us in, Church, and this Diabolus is powerful," said Granny Pearl, and Church felt her concern as she hovered by Church's rainbow orb. "I hope we weakened it enough before," said Church as he watched his Trojan horse army of spirits dwindling, and as the Diabolus raged, his and Granny Pearl's orbs joined the fray. Pinky and Ryan became concerned, seeing several rainbow orbs shooting from Church, but they could only watch helpless as Church's body convulsed for 30 minutes, before going still. Pinky and Ryan then saw black mist oozing from Church's mouth and nose as more rainbow orbs shot from his body. The symbols on the glass walls then glowed red and disappeared. The keepers and guides outside hovered in and surrounded the coffin. "What happened?" asked Ryan with his mouth agape. "They've beaten it," said a spirit keeper, sounding relieved. "Now!" yelled Granny Pearl's orb as it left Church. Ryan and Pinky heaved Church from the coffin, laid him on the floor, closed the lid, and placed the 3 amulets on top. Church opened his eyes and breathed a sigh of relief as he looked up at the black mist swirling slowly inside its glass prison. "Are you okay, Church?" asked Granny Pearl as her orb formed to human shape. Church nodded. "Yes, I'm fine, Gran. Do you think that will contain it?" "It appeared to be getting its power back," said Church as the black mist became more intense. "I hope so. We need to keep it contained here. Solid objects can't travel to the afterlife and we can't risk it getting loose. It is too powerful. We can't defeat this demon and it could wreak havoc in the spirit world should we try to take it to the afterlife." "So what are we going to do with it?" asked Ryan as the coffin filled with an agitated black swirling mist. "It doesn't look like it can escape." Granny Pearl sighed. "I don't know, Ryan. It will be safe here for now, and with no surviving Hansons, their portal will be closed, so it can't go anywhere. The problem will be that it will find a way out. Even if it takes generations, someone could find it and not knowing what it is open the coffin," said Church, frowning. He could feel his grandmother's energy waning as Grandpa Jack, also sounding drained, said, "We can deal with that later, Church. We need to rejuvenate." Church nodded and an exodus of rainbow and crimson spirits headed to the Hansons' portal and vanished. Church, Pinky, and Ryan looked at the floor of the portal as it glowed bright white for a moment and then appeared again as an old wooden cellar floor. "Well, that's the portal closed," said Church and pointed to the coffin and the slow swirling black mist within, "and old Bugalugs must have realized he can't get out." Ryan walked over to the rectangular trunk-sized red chest and picked it up. "Huh, there doesn't seem to be a lot in here. I wonder what all the fuss was about. What does Buckmos mean, Church?" he asked, reading the thick black letters stenciled across the top. "It means Genesis, Ryan, and we can find out more once we get rid of the pair upstairs. Obstacles do not exist to be surrendered to, but only to be broken. I'm glad they left the food before you sent them home. This ham hock's delicious," mumbled Ryan with his mouth full, and he waved the gnawed hock at Church and Pinky. Sure you don't want some? Church shook his head as he prized the old padlock off the chest and lifted the lid. Pinky put another log on the fire as they sat in the kitchen of the Hansons' quaint country cottage. It's just old documents and photographs, said Church, peering into the chest. He took out old faded folders and a thick journal and placed them on the wooden table. It's all in German, mumbled Ryan, waving the hockbone at the pile. What does Tag des Jungsten in der Welt mean? He asked, reading the front cover of the journal. It means Doomsday, Ryan, said Church, picking up a folder with Buckmose and Dr. Joseph Mengele written on the front. He looked inside and took out the documents. Pinky opened another folder when she saw old photographs sticking out and her eyes widened as she looked. Pink gasped, clasped a hand over her mouth, and closed the folder. Ryan wiped his greasy hands on his jeans and picked up a glossy magazine with Colonia Dinidad written along the top and flicked through it. Church looked up and said, Schroeder, that name sounded familiar. He looked at a photograph taken several years earlier of Paul Schroeder, and looked at the cellar door and frowned, and his face also looked familiar. Schroeder, yeah, he was on the news before we left the UK, said Pinky. Church handed her the photo and she nodded. He's that American Secret Service director they said they'd arrested in suspicion for murdering the US president. The news said the CIA discovered he'd used an assassin's drug that made it appear as if he'd had a heart attack. Church furrowed his brow and picked up another folder. I wonder why this magazine about Colonia Dinidad is in there, and I wonder where it is? It looks like an Amish community somewhere, but it's all written in German, said Ryan as Church sat back and gasped. With a look of fear in his eyes, he told them, well, we now know the son who Hitler wanted to give something to. He showed the folder and recent photographs to the stunned-looking pair. Ryan furrowed his brow. It's another one of Schroeder. Oh, he gasped as he looked closer. I always thought that bloke looked familiar every time I saw him on TV, said Pinky through pierced lips. So what do you think Hitler wanted to give his warmonger son? Church picked up the Doomsday Journal that comprised of loose handwritten sections. Church, noticing that with some pages faded it had been written over several years, but looking at the handwriting, knew it was by the same individual. This must be what he wanted his son to have, said Church, who rubbed his chin. What is it? I'm not sure, Ryan, he said, flicking through the pages, but it was written by Adolf Eichmann, the Nazi responsible for many atrocities during World War II with chemical weapons. He escaped after the war, and I think I read about them finding and executing him in the early 1960s. Church furrowed his brow as he read more of the journal. I can't understand most of it because it looks like chemical symbols and scientific jargon, but I assume it is some kind of destructive weapon that Hitler wanted his son to unleash onto the world. Pinky picked up the folder that had shocked her and showed them the photographs of piled-up bodies, with close-up images of distorted dead faces that looked like they died in agony. Church read the German scribbling on the top of one photograph of a large pile of distorted corpses. He looked at Pinky and Ryan and gasped. It said this was the result from 0.01 millimoles/L of the Doomsday formula. The three looked at one another. Armageddon, said Church, that's what he wanted to give his son. But there must be a cure. Why would his son destroy the human race and himself along with it? That's probably in here, Pinky, but we don't need to look any further, said Church, glancing at the logs ablaze in the fireplace. There's only one place this belongs. Grab everything, we will burn it all. Ryan and Pinky nodded, took all the paperwork from the table, and walked over to the fire. No, Church, stop, yelled a familiar voice behind them. It is not truth that matters, but victory. Here, George, said his wife Anne, bringing him over a glass of freshly squeezed orange juice. Who was that on the phone? She asked. George sighed, smiled, and in his articulate American accent said, Senator John McMahon. He told me not to worry. Everything should soon be resolved and we can get back to normal. Anne sat next to him on the plush sofa. He took a sip of the tangy juice, looked concerned and said, "I am not up to this job, honey. I am a scientist, not a politician." Annie leant over and pecked her husband on the cheek. "Have you made any progress with the antidote?" she asked, looking concerned. George sighed, shook his head, and looked into his attractive and elegant 70-year-old wife's comforting eyes, and said, "Professor Kyoto hasn't been able to discover anything to help us with a countermeasure." Anne looked concerned and then, remembering a phone call, said, "Oh, Sarah called and said our guests are on their way. She will be here in around 15 minutes. George smiled. "Great, honey, I really hope they have the answers we need." He pierced his lips and puckered his brow. "From what I have been told, it is only a matter of time." Anne looked into her husband's weary old eyes and saw the fear and concern. She too felt scared but didn't want to show it. Did they uncover anything from Schroeder's autopsy? George shook his head. No, whatever they used to kill Paul Schroeder after he assassinated Bill Graham coagulated his blood, so if he was given the antidote they couldn't have found it. Anne swept George's grey hair over his ear. "You and Paul were friends. I wonder why he killed Bill?" George furrowed his brow and shook his head. "I have no idea, honey. I have known Paul since childhood. Our families traveled here from Germany together under Operation Paperclip after the war. Even though we were only babies, everyone thought we were brothers as we looked so much alike." "Maybe so," said Anne and chuckled, "but you became far more successful. And handsome." George smirked and kissed his wife, although Anne knew he felt troubled and foolish, having not realized that his childhood buddy and murderer of his friend President Bill Graham was a member of the powerful, but secretive, modern-day Nazis. George heaved a sigh and rubbed his temples. "I don't know what to do. This has all happened so fast, and it is down to me to find a solution." "I am sure you will, George. You're a genius, and thanks to the CIA uncovering Paul's connection with that Nazi sect, you now know about the weapon and can stop it." "I hope so, honey," said George and smiled, trying to hide his uncertainty. George felt terrified. He and the U.S. intelligence teams knew almost nothing about the weapon, apart from once released it would unleash a catastrophic event onto the unsuspecting world. George's phone rang and the image of a stern-faced man appeared on the screen. George smiled at Anne, who nodded and left the office. "Hi Chuck, any more news?" asked George with a quiver in his voice. The man on screen, looking dismayed and angry, said, "Yes, our agent within the colony got news to our agent in Chile earlier and said they suspected him of being a spy and he feared for his life. Our contact said the communication between the pair suddenly ended and he heard gunfire, so he is probably dead." George sighed and looked sullen. "I am sorry to hear that, Chuck," he said, surprised by the man's blasé tone. Chuck cleared his throat and said, "He told our man in Chile before he died that the upper echelons of the colony have been telling their followers to prepare." The man glared at George. His cold eyes made him feel uneasy as he told him. "Our spy overheard phone conversations between the leader of Colonia Dignidad and what he assumed were other Nazi colonies around the world. He instructed them to ensure all their people were immunized as they expected the order to launch the missiles to come through at any time." "Damn," said George, trembling as he looked at the man glaring back at him. "Chuck, we don't yet have any defense. Have you any idea who will give that order? Maybe we can find and stop him." The CIA director glowered at George and with contempt in his voice said, "Yes sir, they are awaiting your order, Mr. President." George still felt shaken as his wife and Sarah, the Wolf family's special friend, sat in the lounge next to the Oval Office comforting him. "I don't understand," he said, taking a sip of brandy. "Who do the Nazis think I am? Why are they waiting for me to give the order to destroy the world?" "I don't know, honey," said Anne. "Perhaps they believed the stories the Senate spread about you." George frowned and looked at his wife. "Yes, I know, but I am a rocket scientist like my father. I only went into politics for funding our research. President Graham and the Senate only made me vice president so I could convince other world leaders to get their top scientists and engineers involved with our ARC project. We know, honey, but nobody else does. The world considered you a warmonger. Sarah shuddered, looked behind George sat on the sofa, and smiled. Are you okay, Sarah? You look like you have seen a ghost. Sarah chuckled. I'm fine, Anne. She leant over from her chair, held George's hand, and whispered. George, I think you may soon have your answers. The intercom buzzed and the White House security chief announced. Mr. President, your guests have arrived. Church, Ryan, and Pinky gasped when they entered the room and the three stood to greet them. Along with President George Wolfe, the First Lady, and Sarah, a mortal spirit guide, they smelt peppermint coming from shimmering crimson spirits stood in the corner of the room. Hi team, I'm Joni, Sarah's spirit guide. You need to show George what you have and perhaps together you can come up with a solution to avoid Armageddon. With Joni's temporary portal draining her, she vanished. George, unaware of Joni's presence, went over and extended his hand. Hi team, I'm George. That's what old Adolf must have looked like in his old age, whispered Ryan as the 72-year-old president ordered them a pot of tea as they sat on the sofa around a large coffee table. Church took out the Doomsday Journal and several folders Granny Pearl had instructed him to bring from a briefcase and placed them on the table. Sarah and Anne left the room while George explained his quandary. All we know is that the missiles carrying the bioweapon are ready to launch. We also know it is a devastating airborne spread bioplague that they intend to release into the Earth's atmosphere. The plague would cover the planet on the winds, so even if we destroy their facility, the plague would still be released and spread. George looked at the team and sounding concerned told them. We need a countermeasure. I believe there must be an antidote to the plague in order for the Nazis to survive and take over the planet. If we could find that, we could produce a countermeasure and soak the area before we destroyed their underground facility. Pinky shuddered as she recalled the gruesome old photographs from the folder. I need to know what information you have that may help. Sarah seemed convinced you have the answer, said George, rubbing his chin. Recalling something George had told them, Ryan puckered his brow, looking bemused. You said they were ready to launch, George, so why haven't they? George, looking anxious and with a quake in his voice, told them what the CIA director told him. He then looked perturbed and said, although I can't understand why, at least if they are waiting for me to contact them, it gives us time to come up with something. Looking frustrated, George threw out his hands in desperation and said, I understand none of this. Why me? Church leaned back in the chair, rubbed his chin, looked at the distraught president, and handing him a folder, said, perhaps this will explain, George. Do you want me to translate it for you? George, looking tentative, took the folder and looked inside. He shook his head and said, no, thanks Church, my parents Stefan and Martina taught me. As George read the contents of the folder, Church looked at Pinky and Ryan, as they waited for George's reaction. George's mouth was agape as he spent 15 minutes reading the documents about how Dr. Joseph Mengele had inseminated selected German women's eggs with Hitler's sperm while they underwent routine sterilizations ordered by the FA for German women during the war. George, sounding hoarse, croaked. That's why my parents called me the miracle baby. Mother fell pregnant after they had supposedly sterilized her. He wiped a tear from his eye. She never knew. Church shook his head. I don't think any of them knew, George. George sat back and looked confused as he glared at the three. I don't understand. Hitler died over 70 years ago. Church looked at Pinky and Ryan and leant forward. Did Sarah tell you anything about us? George nodded. Yeah, she told me a little. I know you are like her, powerful psychics who communicate with spirits and may have the answers I need. That is all you need to know for now, George. I will explain the rest later, but for now, we must focus on your problem. George nodded and took a deep breath. Yeah, you're right, Church. What information do you have? Church handed George the Doomsday Journal. The team saw the president's facial expressions changing as he read the scientific jargon and deciphered formulas. He then looked up at the intrigued-looking team and chuckled. Everything we need is here, Church, he said and tapped on a section. Church looked at the excited president and asked. That's great, George. How long will it take you to make a countermeasure? George again looked at the formula, smirked, and said, we already have the main ingredients in vast quantities, we just need to add one more enzyme which is simple to produce. I will call Professor Kyoto and he can make the enzyme. George called the professor, who sounded delighted as George showed him the formula. I can have the enzyme additive ready in a few hours, George. It's simple to produce, and we only need a small quantity, he told the relieved-looking president. Anne and Sarah came into the room with a fresh pot of tea, and while the team sat and drank, George made phone calls to his war cabinet to convene a meeting for a few hours hence in the Oval Office. Anne and Sarah looked confused as George instructed the Air Commodore to arrange with the campus in Atlanta for several tankers full of their product. With George preoccupied, Anne showed the PATH team to the White House guest quarters and went back to the living room to watch TV and wait for George to finish his briefing. While Ryan demolished several steaks in the dining room, Church and Pinky spoke with Sarah and Joni. It's strange how a spirit guide is friends with the US president. How did you meet George, Sarah? Sarah smirked. We have been friends for many years. His father Stefan contacted Joni when he passed over and requested I found an important item and give it to his son. I was shocked when I learned that George was at the time the governor of California, and even more surprised when the item turned out to be a tatty old pocket watch. Sarah took a sip of tea and in her Southern American drawl, continued. Anyhow, it turned out the pocket watch was only a ruse. Stefan knew his analytical and curious son would want to know more about me, and how I'd found it. At the time, Sarah was being pursued by some criminals after returning papers from a deceased mob boss to his son. They thought she was part of a rival criminal network, said Joni. She needed help and turned to George. Sarah nodded. George used his influence to have the gangsters caught. He asked nothing in return for his help, so with the spirit world's blessing, I told him a little about who I was, and what we do. She beamed. That was many years ago and we have been great friends ever since. The PATH team looked at the middle-aged guide with auburn hair and rosy cheeks and smiled. Strength lies not in defense but in attack. Lunch was over at the school and as the kitchen staff cleared away the cutlery, the children returned to their classrooms. The adults of Colonia Dinidad went about their tasks within the large colony above ground. The surface colony had wood and brick houses scattered around and were surrounded by fields. With the adults dressed in simple homemade clothing and the men sprouting long beards, it resembled an Amish community. Large brick buildings were at the center of the colony. These were the school, shops, hospital, community center, and a room with 4 large elevators. Above ground, the colony, surrounded by fields of wheat, oats, and roots vegetables, had meadows with livestock grazing and poultry pens. The animals provided meat and dairy products for the colony. With acres of fruit trees in bloom, the smell of blossom drifted on the light breeze. The colonists looked forward to their annual crop of pears that they knew would come soon in this temperate climate. They all worked hard and enjoyed the simple lifestyle in their self-sufficient community. Several tractors plowed the now dry arid soil on fallow fields to prepare them for sowing. They heard faint rumblings in the sky above them and looked up. It's too early in the year for rain, said one tractor driver, wiping sweat from his brow as all workers in the fields gazed at dark clouds above their heads. Good, it will refresh the air, said his wife as she jumped off the tractor and took her off her bonnet to let the rain fall onto her head. I've never seen clouds like that before, she said as droplets fell onto her skin. Everyone looked at each other confused as the clouds neared the earth. "This rain smells strange," said another farmer and licked his skin. The black clouds hit the colonists, drenching them and the surrounding land of the colony. The colonists, now soaked and feeling confused, looked at one another. "It tastes like Coca-Cola," said a farmer looking bemused. "All 6 have flown over, sir," said the officer looking at the screen. "They did not deviate from their course or altitude." The major went over to the station and looked at the computer screen. He read the information: KC-10 extend refueling tankers, no weaponry. "Very well, there's nothing to worry about," said the major and walked away from the satellite radar station. The underground bunker of the colony was immense. Its huge laboratories contained flasks of the biogenic plague. It also housed numerous ICBMs, packed with enough explosives to ensure maximum coverage of their deadly payloads. With high-tech missiles, worldwide targeting and surveillance equipment, and run by military personnel, it was an impenetrable fortress. Along with the military personnel and scientists, the New World Order Nazi leaders also stayed inside the bunker, coordinating the worldwide Nazi network. Everyone inside the bunker now felt a buzz of excitement, knowing the time was close. Karl Schaefer, a gaunt, frail, elderly man, sat in his wheelchair in the large conference room surrounded by various military officers dressed in different German uniforms of the Second World War. From the Wehrmacht to the SS, they sat around a conference table as screens around the room showed faces of other Nazi Party leaders around the world dressed in similar attire looking at Karl, who had fire in his eyes. "Not long now," said Schaefer. "Our foe should have now risen as he decreed and will be in a vessel accompanying his son." Everyone in the room, along with those on the screens, smiled, and with a Hitler gruss, shouted, "Heil Hitler!" "Is everything prepared?" "We have a long task ahead rebuilding the Reich," asked Schaefer, looking at the faces on the screens around the room. "We and our workers above ground are immunized," said the French Nazi delegate, followed by the other 46 delegates, echoing the same confirmation. "And Schroeder?" he asked the U.S. delegate. "Did you deal with him?" asked Schaefer, his voice sounding abrupt. "Yes, sir, but he was one of us," said the U.S. delegate looking angry. "He knew the risks," said Schaefer and frowned. He sat back in his chair, looked at everyone in the room and on the screen. Smirking, he announced, "Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, let us await the order and prepare for our new world." The satellite radar stations lit up. "Sir, we have multiple inbound targets," shouted an officer, sounding anxious and looking horrified. The major went over and looked at a computer screen. He took a sharp intake of breath and his eyes widened as he saw the numbers, type, and armament of inbound aircraft and incoming ICBMs on the computer screen. "The sky's full of them," he gasped. "How long before they reach here, Lieutenant?" "About 15 minutes, sir." "Prepare defensive measures," ordered the commander, and trembling, he picked up a red telephone. The control center became a flurry of activity as military personnel dressed in old German uniforms scrambled to activate the missile and artillery defense systems. After the major finished his conversation and hung up, the people in the control center went silent, awaiting his next order. The major looked over to a console and the captain at the station clicked his heels together. With sharpness in his voice, the major then ordered, "Launch the weapon." While the captain entered the launch sequence into the computer and the control center personnel sat silently at their posts staring at weapons systems screens, the major looked up at the ceiling and thought, "God help us all. Success is the sole earthly judge of right and wrong." "The world owes you a tremendous debt of gratitude, team," said George as he walked into the dining room after leaving the Oval Office. He sat with them at the table as a steward poured him a coffee and left the room. "Did everything go okay, George?" asked Church, seeing the president looking fretful. George nodded and looked at the path team, his wife, and Sarah. George took a drink of coffee, cupped his hands around the mug, and said, "The pilots reported the surface colony was wiped out within minutes. Although some of our planes were shot down, our bombs had no effect on the underground bunker." George then looked at them. "Until they made the mistake of opening the silo doors to launch ICBMs carrying the bioweapon. Our bombs hit them and breached the bunker." George leant back and with a quake in his voice said, "The facility was destroyed." The five heaved sighs of relief and Church noticed George looking glum. "Our surveillance drones showed smoldering deep craters with a huge chunk of molten rubble at the center," he told them. "How about the poison, did any escape?" asked Ryan leaning forward. George shook his head. "No, there was no bioplague detected in the atmosphere by our converted AWACS, thanks to your countermeasure." George then looked sullen and sighed. Nobody could have survived that inferno. Ryan, Pinky, and Sarah thought the president would look more relieved as George sighed, took another drink of coffee, and mumbled, "I sacrificed all those people. My job as a scientist was to save lives," he grimaced. "This job sucks." George puckered his brow and looked at Church. "Now this is over, Church. How about telling me who you are, and how you know so much about me and Adolf Hitler?" Church looked taken aback and felt unsure what information he was allowed to divulge. Sarah smiled at him as the aroma of peppermint and Brussels sprouts filled the room. "You can tell George about the encounter with the Diabolus, Church. He can help solve our problem," said Granny Pearl. George and Anne turned around as Church, Ryan, Sarah and Pinky looked over their shoulders at the spirits, but seeing, hearing, and smelling nothing, they turned back around and George smirked. "We have other guests, I take it?" Church smiled, nodded, and related their story to George and Anne about their encounter with Hitler's Diabolus and the problem they now faced. George, learning a little about the spirit world from Sarah, didn't appear shocked or surprised by Church's story. Once Church finished his tale, the smart analytic scientist sat back into the chair and smiled. "I think I can help you with your problem, Church. Please come with me, I want to show you something." Epilogue. The Solar Drive spacecraft streaked through the dark vacuum of space with the sleek shiny silver spacecraft resembling a rocket from a 1960s science fiction movie. Controlled by computers and robots, this unmanned spacecraft's mission was to land on planets of interest on the far reaches of space where robotic rovers would take samples and video footage. It would then relay the results to strings of control satellites following behind that would send the information back to Earth for analysis as to whether any planets could sustain human life. This ultra-high-tech space reconnaissance vehicle was the first and most vital stage in George Wolfe's Space Ark project to find a new home for the growing Earth's populace. Although it could take many generations to achieve, this was the beginning. The only occupant in the spaceship swirled around its glass sarcophagus in the pitch blackness. The demon spirit of the 20th century's most notorious despot was on its endless journey to discover a new home for the people it had tried so hard to destroy. The end. I hope you enjoyed this short thriller, based on the full novel Path. If you want to read and download books and ebooks and listen to audiobook snippets by this innovative author and man of humor, and get free gifts, puzzles, quizzes, jokes, and read hilarious blogs, please visit the fun sites at podhouseauthor.com or stormwriter.weebly.com. The links are below. Thanks for watching.